governor's office or the authority's budget office responded at all specifically about how this applies, how the policy
Not
guidance
specifically.
applies?
We've got nothing in writing. We've been having conversations with them, but we don't have anything that says this is exactly the way it's going to end up.
Okay.
We're very, very hopeful for at least the youth center, Main Street Theater. We think we've got it worked out. We think we've got it worked out for the Garden Club. Those three organizations were the biggest and the most timely.
Okay, so just to summarize, you believe that the Roosevelt Island Youth Program, the Main Street Theater, and the Garden Club will be able to be funded and operated through the end of this year?
Watch your language.
Yes.
Well, there's
Watch your
actually
language,
one
very
distinction too
specific.
between the Garden Club and the Main Street Dance and Theater. There's no funding going on there. They have
Right.
license to operate the space.
Exactly.
So that makes them separate and distinct from this conversation
Right.
because this guidance is only talking about giving out money and dispersing funds.
Right.
So, but you can continue from there.
Right. The
Okay.
Main Street Theater, I mean, the youth
It's-
center, we're
it's
talking
been
about
mentioned a few times.
$175,000 that we have to write a check for and say, here you go, this is for you. Main Street Theater and the Garden Club are different. We had to work out a license agreement whereby they would use the space and some of them, it would be leased, so it would be a different kind of thing.
Okay, so what about the youth program, which requires money?
That requires money. So it's going out as opposed to coming in, and how do we
also a
work
very
out the coming
complex
in part of it?
interrelationship with the city funding authority.
Yes.
So just so we understand what the conclusion is to the meeting, do you believe that the Roosevelt Island Youth Program will obtain their $175,000?
I believe they will. Do I have it in writing? No. Do we have anything?
Right,
Yeah.
and it won't be 175. It will be till the end of the year, and funding then, and then most probably an RFP.
Okay. And then in regard to the organizations that have applied for public purpose funds through the RIOC public
I have no.
we have no idea.
Nothing on that one yet.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, one thing that
And-
this sort of the guidance forces us to do is to look back to the RFP process because that's permissible and explicit and provable in a number of different ways. You have to put yourself back in a little bit in the ABO shoes. They have all these authorities, all operating the state. They are simply in this mandate requiring the authorities to follow the letter of their enabling statute. So it's a conservative stance, and within that conservative stance, we have to find room to operate.
There's also, there's another thing that's been going on here, and they sort of got meshed together. Roosevelt Island, because of how we built it up with community groups, people just getting together and building things and starting things, we didn't always go back to the governor's office and say, hey, can we do this and can we do that? So we were a little bit loose in what we were doing with spaces and things, and there's an empty storefront here, well, why not just use that to do this? And there's something else here, let's do that. That stuff is all tightening up now. So asking the organizations to pay for the space they've been using has nothing really to do with this statute. That was coming down the pike anyway. And we were trying to work out the fairest way to do it and the cheapest way for the organizations to do it. The fact that some people seem to think that we ran out of space and that's why we're now charging everybody. It's got nothing to do with that. If we had 10,000 square feet of space and one guy who wanted 200 square feet, we'd still have to charge him for it. So it's got nothing to do with not having space or trying to just charge a lot so that not everybody can afford it or anything like that. And that's somewhat been coming into play here. So you should understand that that's a separate.
Well, then how do you come to the valuation of what the space should cost?
Different issue, not for this meeting.
That's
Which
the
is-
real estate committee.
It's just,
I'm just saying. I'm talking statutes now. But we take where is it and how big is it and what can it be used for and all that kind of stuff and what kind of an organization is trying to use it. We want to give breaks to the nonprofits, to the residents, to the non-residents. Well, we don't give presidents, no. I won't say that. Say that.
thank you.
So there's a whole lot that goes into it. Okay. Any more questions on that? Because that's our only item.
Well, you need some kind of summary, I guess. Well, I tried a few minutes ago. There's always a question of what happens next. So what do we think happens next?
I thought we said that. What we said is RIOC's going to go do its thing if it can. We're going to continue working with the ABO, with the governor's office, and with our legislators to see if changing the legislation or hooking something onto something else is viable.
And also having a priority list as
And
to
have
what are the
priorities.
operating so we can RFP
Right.
regardless of the fact of, what's happening with the other stuff, because we have to have that plan B in place.
Right.
Because
Plan B is important short term.
Yes.
Right, and
Long term, we need.
Plan B, the RFP process is to provide community services along with our general development plan and enabling statute. So that's still permissible, but it's not a short process.
It has to be done under contractual.
Right. So it's a more complicated way of doing these things.
And
So
bottom
then-
line, we want to follow the law or the guidance of the ABO. We want to do what the state wants us to do, but more important or most important of all is we want to keep the community running. We want to keep these groups alive and well and viable and not under the kind of hardships that they're under from a ruling like this. So we got to work it out.
We may need to make a distinction, someone may need to make a distinction among the community groups which have applied for funds. In the case of the youth center, we had an April 1st
Right.
date, we had to make period. Figure out who must have funds right now in order to continue to operate, and who can lie low for a while if they're unfunded or underfunded, or shrink their
needs. One of the things that I was just sort of a minor point, but if an entity is applying for the discretionary funds, and there's a lag between the time that you receive the funds or you would receive the funds, maybe what could be asked of the developers or Cornell or whoever it is on the island is bridge funding, basically, to get you to the point where the discretionary funds could be received.
Well, in fact, we were going to do that with the FDR Hope Memorial. We were going to try to do some bridge funding, and we're not allowed to do that.
We're not saying,
the developer could.
You could ask that
principle, but they can do it.
the real estate community as opposed
we
to.
can suggest, we can't ask.
Well, RIOC
can ask.
Right, yes, and that's what I meant, RIOC. But it's just it's a different kind of ask than saying,
Right.
give me $100,000.
Yeah.
It's saying, get me to the point where the discretionary funds are available.
That would be, I would imagine, difficult though, because you'd need to have the approval there to know that it's happened. Like with the Hope Memorial, we know we
There
got the approval.
would have to be
so
some commitment
I
from
don't know
whoever
that they
the
can make
funding
that until
entity
after
is.
this time has passed.
See, we wouldn't be involved at all.
No, I know,
Right.
no.
So,
I'm just saying-
it's just another thought.
It's just another thought, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And David, you're done? Anything?
There was a question to Francis, but she wanted to cover it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about bridge loans. Can we provide bridge loans?
No.
Francis said no.
No.
Yeah, we can't. We don't want to do
Grants
some
are allowed.
that's a memorial that we can't cover. Okay, if there's nothing else, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.